Right now on Tech Radio, is it time to ban the smartphone?
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week online and on air with RT Radio, we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and the world. You're welcome to episode 1024, looking back on the 7 biggest stories of the week, including good and bad news for Apple, why your landline is dead, and a hot tip on cheap electronic gadgets. Plus, our guest interview this week is with cyber psychologist Ruth Guest, talking about child protection on the internet.
From techcentral.ie, this is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty. As always, our editor-in-chief Niall Kitson here with us, kicking off with the biggest tech story of the week, Niall.
Arguably.
The Nelson Mandela of tech. That's what I was going to call this guy. Ooh. Even though there's no real comparison. He wasn't away for half as long. I don't think his cause was as big as Nelson Mandela's, but I'm just saying it's a guy who's had a very long incarceration one way or the other.
He has lived rent-free in a lot of people's heads for a long time. No more so than the Ecuadorian embassy, where he was holed up for 7 years. I didn't realise I was being funny there for a second.
Julian Assange is going to love that. Yeah, the man who lived rent-free for a number of years. That's not the headline we were looking for. Come on, give me the news.
Yeah, okay. Julian Assange is a free man. He walked out of a court in Saipan, which is a US territory, apparently, and is, as we speak, back in Australia. Because he is an Australian citizen, marking the end of a process that started 13, 14 years ago. It's been a long road. Yeah. So just to recap, Julian Assange, founder of Wikileaks, which has been with us since 2006. Wikileaks, basically a dead drop mailbox. So if you've got something you want to share, just post it to Wikileaks. They'll sift through it and open source it for the world to have a look at. Now, WikiLeaks has seen its influence wax and wane over the years. I think it's on the wane at the moment. Now, in 2010, they had their first big rise to prominence with the video called Collateral Murder, which showed US helicopter pilots attacking 2 Reuters journalists and some people they were meeting with in the street. They were apparently armed, not the journalists. The people they were meeting were armed and quite close to a group of American soldiers. The helicopter opened fire, killing, I think, 3 or 5 people. And the footage for it was captured and eventually leaked online. Also responsible for the publishing of some 250,000 diplomatic cables from sort of the diplomatic service around the world. It made people realize that diplomatic cables aren't not as scandalous as you might think. A lot of it is sort of gossip and backchat and all that kind of thing. So maybe not the huge win they thought it was. Also responsible for Chelsea Manning coming to prominence. They later became a candidate for was it the House or the Senate in the States? Anyway, she didn't get elected. Also, wealth. I mean, what else would you consider their greatest hit? Only in 2016, the leaking of the Democratic emails during the presidential campaign, which arguably did damage to Hillary Clinton's chances and arguably put Donald Trump over the top and arguably came from Russia. And was left in WikiLeaks' possession. So there's still a bit of conspiracy theory fodder out of that. But of course, Julian Assange got himself into trouble initially in 2010 over alleged charges of sexual assault in Sweden, where he was sort of doing a tour and talking about his life and work. In 2012, went to the Ecuadorian embassy. In 2019, he was kicked out and arrested by British police. there ensued an awful lot of legal back and forth about whether he can be extradited to the US to face charges under the Espionage Act. I think he was facing 17 charges. If he was convicted on everything, he would have faced about 175 years in prison, with the assumption that horse trading would go on, as is the case in the American justice system. Eventually, the case worked through the UK courts. A parallel effort was happening in Australia because there is a change of administration there, and the perspective was very much, hey, we've got an Australian citizen in trouble. He's been a very high-profile person, has done the world some service. Let's go to bat for him. So you've had an awful lot of back channel chatter between the US and Australia, eventually coming out in Assange agreeing to plead guilty to one charge under the Espionage Act, which would have a sentence between 5 and 10 years. He was basically sentenced to time served, and you're not allowed back in the States, and go to Australia, please, which he has done. And as we're speaking now, he is in the arms of his wife, Stella, one would imagine, readjusting to life back on home soil. The question is, can he live a quiet life? Will Julian Assange just go, okay, I had my moment. WikiLeaks has a higher mission. They haven't really done anything in 3 years. I mean, I'm sure they've been, they're active on social media and all that sort of thing. But in terms of a big hit, they haven't really had one in a few years. I think mainstream media has caught up an awful lot with what WikiLeaks used to do. And they've got a better standard of reporting because they have more resources that they can put into things. I mean, if you look at what's, collaborations between The Guardian and Mother Jones and this sort of thing, media outlets working together, I think, have surpassed what WikiLeaks was able to do on their own. Because we've had things like Cambridge Analytica, we've had the Panama Papers. Certainly WikiLeaks' influence is there, but I think as an organisation, possibly media has moved on from them. Do you think Julian Assange can live a quiet life?
It's up to him. Anybody can live a quiet life if they want to live a quiet life. And you just have to look at movie stars and singers and stuff like that. Some of them are being papped all the time because they allow it to happen. Others keep their private lives very private. Okay, so it's entirely possible. I would hope that Julian Assange went, I've done my bit. I made a major change in the world, which he did. That's it. I'm done. Quiet life. I think he will be able to sit back and probably live without having to work for the rest of his life. Because if anything, he might write a book or something about everything that happened to him if he hasn't done so already. Whenever maybe some speaking gigs or whatever. I think he has every potential to live a nice, quiet life. And I wish him the best of luck to do that. He has, if you want to look at what he's done for journalism and for technology and for all the stuff that the point he was making, he has made a massive contribution and also given up an awful lot of his life in order to do that. So now he should be just let graze. That's what I reckon. I have a question for you as a tech journalist. Okay.
Yeah.
What's the one thing you learned from the Julian Assange story? You personally.
Me personally. Okay. The extent to which the man can overshadow the mission. That to me was the biggest lesson, because when Assange's personal brand became tainted through the allegations that he didn't, were ultimately, after 2 attempts, were discounted in Sweden. His actions, once those allegations were made, did not reflect well on him. And because he was associated so strongly with WikiLeaks, it didn't really reflect very well on WikiLeaks, the organization. Yeah. I mean, if you look at, let's go back to St. Steve of Jobs. I mean, the man's identity was completely intertwined with Apple. If something went wrong with Steve Jobs, something went wrong with Apple. There was no delineation. I think Julian Assange had that similar cult of personality at WikiLeaks. So did he do WikiLeaks damage? I think there were moments when he certainly didn't help. I don't think WikiLeaks managed to evolve beyond him.
Grant, there is no I in team. You remind me of a time when I joined RT as a baby DJ. I was early 20s. And there was a big meeting, and the meeting was entitled, the clickbait title was, what are we going to do about Gay Byrne? Because Gay Byrne at the time was the biggest media star and had been for at least 30 years in Ireland. He was the biggest thing in media, absolutely. And the problem was they were afraid he was going to leave for one of the new commercial radio stations. And then they're kind of going, what are we going to do? And of course, they're having this big meeting. And me, like being a cocky little whatever 23-year-old, just kind of went, like everybody's getting really scared. And I went, yeah, but what would we do if like Gay died? And I swear to God, the room went quiet. You could hear a pin drop and all of the heads turned around to go, who said that? And that's when I learned, keep your damn trap shut. For at least a year in a new job until you suss it out. But the point being is that no one person is bigger than an organisation. So Gay left and RT is still there. Pat Kenny famously moved over to News Talk. RT is still there. Do you know what I mean? So that's the lesson to be taken from that. Anyways, Julian Assange aside, that was the biggest story of the week. We've talked a lot about that. There's tons of other things going on which I want to get into. We've got good news, bad news, bad. Oh, hang on, let me see. It's bad news, good news, bad news for Apple. Go on, give me the first bit of bad news of the EU.
Let's go with the first bit of bad news. We talked about problems with the App Store and Apple's walled garden approach to all things apps. Yep. The good thing about having a walled garden is that everything is under the same terms and conditions. Apple has good oversight. Apple can approve or unapprove apps in the App Store. You can say, okay, you're done. Or, yeah, sure, come in. And that's very good and that's very safe. However, under the Digital Markets Act, which is all about creating a level playing field where people have access to platforms and the ability to make money from those platforms, this is no go. This is not good. So under the Digital Markets Act, we are going to get third-party app stores for Apple devices. Eventually, I mean, the opportunity cost is massive at the moment, so it might be a while before we see them in real terms. But also, the app terms and conditions have been found to be in contravention of the Digital Markets Act. Basically, this is all about what developers can do for people within their apps. If a developer thinks, okay, well, I want somebody to complete a transaction or to make a transaction on my web page outside of Apple's ecosystem, it should be as easy for me to do that as it is for Apple to do it their way. Unfortunately, it isn't. If you want to complete a transaction on a developer's website, you have to link out from the app as opposed to be able to do it within the app, which is the ideal. So this very idea of, okay, well, look, if you want to do something that's not Apple approved, you have to link outwards. And it's no longer their problem. It's on the developer. But you know what? It's a bad user experience. It's an internal barrier compared with one-click transaction made within the app. It's a superior user experience. So the EU has said, right, that's it. This is not cricket. And the penalty, as you know, for contravention of the Digital Markets Act is actually quite steep. It's 10% of a company's worldwide global turnover. That there's also, a lower ceiling, which might be employed depending on what the actual fine might be. But I mean, the full letter of the law could get Apple in the hole for 40 billion euro. 40 billion euro. It won't, but it could.
Oh, have we finally hit a number that could hurt? 40 billion? That would hurt. That would hurt Apple.
That would hurt. That would make them sit up and play ball.
That would hurt any of them, wouldn't it? That would even hurt Google.
It would,
wow, 40 billion.
It's the only thing big tech understands.
That case is going to rumble on because there's no way that's going to be appealed and then reappealed and then appealed again and whatever. It'll end up in a courtroom in Mars. That's how long it's going to go on for. Anyways, we'll see how long the 40 billion goes. I've got some good news on Apple this week, and that is they have got self-repair is a thing that Apple didn't encourage, and now they're starting to do it again, thanks to the EU. They've got a web-based diagnostic tool, which has been available in the States, but not in the EU. Well, it's coming, and will be available in Ireland soon, okay? Very simple to use, all right? So you enter the device that's giving you a problem into diagnostic mode. Then you enter a serial number, and then it checks the device and gives recommendations. It'll do this on an iPhone, a Mac, and a Studio Display. It scans the device for problems with the display, the camera, Face ID, software integration, audio issues, all that kind of stuff, and will recommend what parts may need to be repaired. And then you can take that to an Apple authorized dealer or an independent service provider, because this is the first thing that they do. All right. You bring it into an Apple authorized dealer. This is exactly what they do. Right. So that's all the good news. However, there's bad news.
Bad news?
Because it's not as easy as it all sounds. Okay. 3 things. Firstly, in order to run the diagnostic on the troublesome device, you need to enter the serial number on another Apple device.
Okay.
So
on
you
another
either need
Apple
to,
device. So you have to, if you want to fix one, you have to own 2.
This is it, all right? And this is what makes me laugh about Apple. It's kind of like if I'm trying to log into whatever, to go, we've sent a code to your other Apple device. And I go, I've sold them all. I only have one left. Or it's whatever, miles away, whatever. So anyway, so you need to enter the serial number on another Apple device. And also, both devices must be running iOS 17. And just in case you're wondering, iOS 17, do I have that? Well, that's the one that they've just announced this month. All right.
Okay.
All right.
And
so it has to be running iOS 17. And for the Mac, it needs to be running macOS 14, which is the one that they released last September. So if you don't have the very latest Apple stuff, tough.
Oh, that's sneaky, because
I
mean,
know.
we're trying to elongate the lifespan of our devices as much as possible, but we know that Apple have a cutoff point for every new generation of iOS, where they say, look, beyond here, there's no point in downloading it. It's not going to work.
And it's not a long cutoff point anyway. But anyway, look, it's Apple. I'm smiling at what you say about the walled garden, that everything is safe and it's approved and and all that stuff is good. But it only works with the very latest. Do you know what I mean? If you've an Apple device that's like 5 years old, oh man. Yeah, you're in trouble. Anyways, moving on. More news stories this week. OpenAI. And the voice of her, what was the name of the actress?
Scarlett Johansson.
Scarlett Johansson, of course. And they said they didn't base one of their AI voices on her. It just happens to sound incredibly like her.
And the CEO, Sam Altman, just happened to tweet the night before they released said voice in Apple. It's like, okay, look, just stop punching yourself in the face, you know? It was a little bit presumptuous, anyway, a little bit cheeky.
Yeah. What are their plans this week now for voice interface on ChatGPT?
Yeah, well, voice interface is on the back burner. We're not going to be getting it for, they say, a month. I think, well, okay, if that's what they're telling us. We'll see. Does this mean that they are going to recast their digital assistant Sky? One would imagine so. They're going to have to hire somebody with a totally different voice. Maybe go with a male voice. Although I think there is something about female voices and female voice casting, isn't there? About female voices being inherently friendlier and easier to get along with. Although I like the idea of having like a drill instructor or something like that.
Sergeant,
like,
yeah.
Why are you asking me this question?
Yeah, a friend of mine said that he reprogrammed the voice on the sat nav or whatever in the car of somebody. They're living abroad. They're living in Dubai. He said, I reprogrammed it in my Irish voice going, it's back there, you bleed need you. It was 2 right turns back. That kind of, you can have a bit of fun with those things. What else is going on in the world? Copper lines, the death of the landline. I've been watching this in the UK because they're trying to get rid of all of the copper landlines. It's kind of like, well, who uses them anymore? Like, everybody's on fibre or on some kind of an internet connection. So they're trying to get rid of the copper landlines. And now they're trying to do the same in Ireland, but they're finding here in Ireland the same problem that they encountered in the UK. And that is, even though you don't think about landlines as a thing anymore, they're still there. Older people will certainly use them, still have a phone in the hall or beside them in the telly. I don't know how many alarm systems are still connected to the old landline. And here's the thing that I hadn't realised was that a lot of the point of sale things for the credit cards in shops are all connected to the landline as well.
Oh, I didn't know because that's how point of sale. Oh.
Yeah, neither did I. But all of these things use and more use copper lines. So it's not a case of, well, just because we're not making phone calls anymore using the landlines, we're all just using our smartphones. They're still in use. So the UK have kind of come across this problem, and Comrag I don't know if Comrag are the ones doing it. They'd have responsibility for it, I suppose. But they're looking at doing the copper line switch off in Ireland as well. Don't think it's going to happen as quickly as they think. But it's on the desk. Other news. Oh, here, you give us the lowdown on this because it's one of your favorite topics. Because I know if you won the lottery tomorrow, you would be driving a Tesla Cybertruck.
I would be first in line. I would travel to go buy a Tesla Cybertruck and not be able to drive it because, as you know, I can't drive. So...
It doesn't matter in a Tesla Cybertruck. You just point at it. If you bang into them, it does. It's like playing a video game now. You just bounce back
money
off.
Well spent. Money well spent. So the Cybertruck is being recalled for the fourth time. So it's 11,500 almost vehicles. And there's two things wrong. One of which requires a little bit of explanation and the other is sort of that's not great. The one that requires a little bit of explanation is what they are calling it's basically, the way it's got an open flatbed and then there's the sort of the two...
wings, if you want to put it that way.
Wings, if you want to put it. I don't know what the...
Gives it a bit of shape, whatever.
Nomenclature on it is. So basically what has happened is that the top of, the wings, the sail applique, they call it, because it's basically the top rolls up and it sort of rolls up underneath this part of the side of the Cybertruck.
And does that basically you can give it a roof, does it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, that siding, the adhesive is faulty, and therefore these things might, we haven't seen an example of it, but they might fly off and create a problem for other motorists that happen to be driving behind it. So basically, Tesla has to recall the Cybertrucks to make sure the adhesive is in good condition before they can let them back out on the road again. So that's a sort of okay, not a problem we would have seen or expected ahead of time. The other one, which is much scarier, is to do with the windscreen wiper, because as we know, the Cybertruck has a massive windscreen. It also has a massive windscreen wiper, and it only has one of them. What has happened in some cases is the motor responsible for the single windshield wiper is burning out. And if that happens, you have no wiper. That's it. I don't think that needs further explanation.
No, it doesn't. I'm kind of thinking, if I was just driving down the coast road in Clontarf or something, I just pull over and I'm done. But if I'm going like 120 kilometers an hour on the M50, I suppose, it is a problem.
It's a big problem.
Do you know what? It is. And it's funny, isn't it? It's like kind of the failure point for so many of these things is always such a small thing. Look at the size of that truck and it's almost indestructible and it's being recalled because of the windshield wiper.
Yeah. Yeah. And, not too long ago, only a couple of weeks ago, they were being recalled because of the accelerator pedal. There was like a plastic covering on the accelerator pedal.
Off. You've put me right off now. I had 120 grand there ready to go and blow on a cyber truck. I had a ship ready to import it into Ireland. I was going to pay all the duty and everything. I was going to pay off somebody in the EU with a big brown envelope so I'd be allowed driving and stuff like that. I'm not going to do any of that anymore now because it's got a dicky windshield wiper. I have got a brilliant tip for some cut price electronic devices, which I'm going to wrap up with in a second. But first, news-wise, I'm very, very surprised to hear you being upset about MTV News. What's going on?
Well, I'm of a generation that is, I remember when MTV used to play music. And that was a long, long time ago at this stage.
I don't even remember when MTV played music.
I get very nostalgic for the mid to late 90s. And MTV, owned by Paramount Global, I think, they bought MTV a year ago. They took control of the website, just went, okay, we're not updating this website anymore. Or rather, we're not updating the news website anymore. MTV still has a regular website promoting its shows and all its reality and prank stuff that it does. I mean, the M being very much a silent M, if you will, for a long time. See what I did there? See what I did?
Yeah. Go on, move on.
I've done it twice. I've done it twice in one episode. So Paramount Global has just went, okay, look, we have no use for MTV News. We have no use for, MTV News as a website. Let's just shut it down. So websites get shut down all the time. No biggie. However, what is happening this time is the website is not only being shut down, all that years and years and years of built up music reporting is getting deleted. It is being deleted off the servers. It's not going to vanish. I was on Wayback Machine on archive.org. Yeah. And I had no idea 2001 was such a busy year for music. I was learning all about Fred Durst's dreams for his new son. I was reading that Savage Garden broke up. I was pretty upset over that. So it's good to see the material is still there and how awful the design on the website was. But just the idea of losing such a chunk of, my formative years, if you will, just fleeting arbitrarily, it feels. Not that it's a website I've ever visited, but it was just the point that, this snapshot in time has been cut off at a corporate level.
It's a resource. It's not anything that anyone would ever visit. It's like the National Library, which I cannot recommend highly enough a visit to the National Library, okay? It's just an amazing place. But nobody really goes in there unless they're doing some research and they're using it as a resource. I would imagine MTV News website, any news website, the New York Times, the Irish Independent, whatever, any of them, RTE. Do you know what I mean? They've got stuff that's going back decades. All right. But who is actually going to go in and browse through it? Nobody. But as a resource where you kind of say to yourself, Fred Durst, what happened to him? And when did Savage Garden break up? Why did they break up? You can go in and you can find these stories and to have it there. What a fantastic resource. Yes. But should MTV just leave it there and maintain it for the good of mankind if they don't want to? Now, I mean, it's hardly going to cost them anything, is it? Is it? No. So they're just being tight.
They're just being tight.
I can understand why you'd miss it. But it's not going to kill you either, is it?
It's not, but it just made me wistful for an easier time.
Wistful for your youth, when you could take 2 steps at a time and not run out of breath. All right, last story for this week, and this is all the gadgets. One of my favourite. It's so Irish. This Amazon Prime Day is going to be happening and it's July 16th and 17th. Of all the things, the one thing I didn't write down was when Amazon Prime Day is actually going to happen. I'm such a bad boy. July 16th and 17th. It's usually mid-July anyway. I have used this very successfully, and I do wait the 2 times that I have a wish list on Amazon of, I would call it rubbish gadgets, things that I don't need, right? So, kind of like Alexa speakers or Fire Sticks, maybe a new Kindle for somebody for Christmas or something like that, or one of their Blink cameras or something like that. power banks, USB sticks, little leads, SSDs, all those kind of little things, right? I find you get brilliant prices for them on Amazon Prime Day. So I always just I just let them build up in my wish list. And then when Amazon Prime Day comes along, I go in and buy them. And I'm just saying it's very Irish because Amazon Prime Day is on July 16th. And 17th, which
very Irish.
Strikes me as being days. It's like happy hour from 5 o'clock to 10, which I've seen in many places as well. But anyway, a note for the diary. If you want to pick up some bargains, that's where to do it. Listen, let's wrap it up for the news for this week. Niall Kitson, Editor-in-Chief of TechCentral.ie. Thank you very much.
Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland.
We know social media can be bad for us, so what can we do to protect our mental health? And when it comes to protecting younger people, should we limit their exposure to the internet or give them the skills to navigate it safely and keep our fingers crossed that they use them? To answer that question, we're joined by a cyber psychologist and founder of Saoirse, which is like the Duolingo of cyber safety. Her name is Ruth Guest. She had a chat with Niall Kitson about FOMO, smartphone bans, and more.
Ruth, I think it's fair to say we exist in an attention economy fueled by FOMO, or the fear of missing out. Do you think this, as I said, this attention economy has kind of rewired our brains, that we're in constant search of, that dopamine hit, that validation that, we're on trend or perhaps even ahead of it, or to get constant approval from people we don't even know? Is this is this where we are right now?
Yeah, so I think that it's true and it's untrue, as in there is research to suggest that this happens at a chemical level in the brain, but there's also research to say that it doesn't. On a social level, it can happen. So when we look at maybe our echo chambers, if we're on Twitter, an echo chamber is basically when you see all the content with the current beliefs that you have. You will always go back to Twitter. You will always go back to that echo chamber, and you will then it'll just reinstate and reinforce the beliefs that you actually have, so you don't see anything else. That is the first thing that will keep people, let's say, hooked on social media, because you're always seeing what you believe rather than the other point of view. But then when it comes to the fear of missing out, that is very, very common. And it really kind of escalated when Instagram came around. Because on Instagram, people tend to portray their ideal selves. So that might be if you have a nice car, a nice house, a nice holiday, you're only going to put up the great photos, or you're going to be out with your friends for dinner. You're not going to be posting photos of when you're having a really bad day and you've got a big spot in your face or something like that, because that's not what the algorithm wants to see. So when you go onto Instagram, you can be bombarded by all this kind of idealistic type of content, which can obviously make you feel like you're missing out completely. To say that it's rewiring our brains might not be accurate, just because we don't have the research. But we can definitely see it happening, that it is affecting people on a social level. So, for example, if you're staying at home on a Friday night and you're watching Netflix, and you're also double screening, as you say, and you're scrolling on Instagram, and you see a load of people out for dinner in a restaurant. If we took away phones, that's actually the equivalent of someone just standing outside the restaurant and looking at the window and not actually going in and joining. So in that regard, yes, it is completely FOMO. TikTok, which is obviously a very popular app, and the rise of TikTok has been absolutely massive, has different types of content, and it doesn't actually create the same kind of FOMO effect. And the reason for that is because people are kind of portraying a more fun or a more fun self, or a self that isn't as ideal, but it's a little bit more theatrical. There's a lot more humor to it. It's all about following trends and dancing and this kind of thing. So if you spend a lot more time on TikTok, from my social circles, what I have kind of observed is that people don't actually feel as much FOMO from TikTok as they would from Instagram directly.
Given that sort of the platforms that we're talking about are very new, I mean, Facebook looks comparatively, like a dinosaur compared to what we expect these days. I mean, it's pretty much, if you want to look for fake news and disgruntled relatives, that's Facebook is where you go. If you want something that's slightly more entertaining, well, maybe TikTok is where you should be. Are we really seeing this generational shift from the likes of Facebook, which is in danger of being left behind, even though it is still immensely profitable, towards these sort of, I want to say niche, but I suppose more demographically defined social networks like TikTok? And do you think this is sort of linked to that sense of cool? That sense of, as soon as the older people arrive, that platform is dead and we got to move on to somewhere else.
Yeah, well, I think it's all to do with the generational trends, And I wasn't around in the 70s, but like I heard flares were really cool in the 70s and afros, right? So, and then all the parents of the kids in the 70s were like, oh God, like that's, what are you doing? Like cringe, Nowadays, like I'm a millennial and I use the laughy emoji face, and I know that Gen Z, every time they see it, they're like, oh, that's so cringe, So I do think it's different trends for different generations, but it's the fact that technology is advancing so fast, and we do have these social media apps that are relatively new. There's a lot of fear mongering around it. And I think that the older generations don't understand, some of them don't understand how fast the technology is actually advancing, whereas the younger generations are just embracing it because it's all that they actually know.
I think that point about it's all people know is fascinating because, as somebody that was that remembers the launch of the first iPhone and remembers the launch of the app economy, you kind of have an element of critical thinking to it. And you sit down and you go, actually, is this useful? Actually, is that not useful? Whereas Gen Z just seem to take these things, maybe not so much as read, but they're much more confident and willing to jump into things and see what can be done and play around with them. Do you think that's an important generational shift as well, that, these digital natives are so willing to try things perhaps without that level of skepticism that maybe previous generations would have had?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's adaptability, and I think it, like you said, these digital native generations, there's no fear when it comes to technology, and they're not skeptical whatsoever. So they are able to embrace it and enjoy technology better. And what I think personally, there's no research to back this up, but I think that leads to an increase in creativity. And I think that that's probably going to be the future. So when it comes to maybe social media apps that people are building, or we have these technology like phones and stuff, in 20 or 30 years' time, there's going to be technology that myself and you we can't even comprehend what it's going to be like. But the kids nowadays, the cool kids, the Gen Z, they'll just pick it up like that. They'll know exactly what to do because they're the ones that are going to be designing it, because they have that freedom and creativity within their tech use at the moment. Whereas older generations, I think, have that fear and they're kind of skeptical around it. So I don't think they'd be able to adapt as well.
Yeah, and looking at that level of adaptability when it comes to sort of parenting and child protection, that brings with it an immense sense of responsibility. And okay, I've given my child a smartphone. They're only 12 or 13. What can they do with it? Have I just given them a phone just so they can fit in with their mates and I can put Revolut on it and, send them money if they're stuck for, bus fare home or something like that? Is there a sense among parents that they're effectively handing their kids, a loaded weapon, and that it brings with it a massive number of issues about child protection, both from, kids, wanting to fit in and misusing these things, but also from parents not understanding the consequences of giving their kids so much freedom on the net?
Yeah, so I do think that there's different types of parents. From our research at Saoirse, which is it's just an educational game where we can teach preteens how to navigate the online world safely. That's what we're building at the moment. From our research in that company, we found that there are so many different types of families and so many different types of circumstances where some parents don't care about the phone. They know that the issues are there, they know that the risks are there, but they're kind of like, okay, let's just go for it because we have to get on with it. Then there's other parents who refuse to give their kids phones until they're 16. And then there's other kids that have, or other parents that have processes in place for their preteens that they'll maybe say, okay, you can have the phone for 2 hours, but you have to do 2 hours of exercise, of 2 hours of socializing outside. So they have these processes in place at home. I do think it is really scary for parents at the moment because of how fast technology is advancing, and they feel that they can't keep up because they have other responsibilities, like e.g. actually raising their kids, or they've got to work. There are so many other things going on, whereas kids do have the freedom and the flexibility to play with this technology. And some children don't realize, or preteens or teens don't realize how dangerous some of the technology they can be. Now, not the software itself, but the risks that they can encounter. So that might be cyberbullying or stranger danger, it could be scams. There is a lot out there. But there needs to be education around smartphones and social media because, of course, parents are concerned. Parents know about the risks. Kids don't. It's an educational thing across all generations.
So looking at things from, above the parental level, say if you're a TD or somebody working on legislation, you're looking at sort of this problem where kids are having their mental health affected by social media in one way, shape or form, that there needs to be some level of regulation. And indeed, we do have the Digital Services Act, which will be helping us an awful lot more as the years come. It creates this sort of it develops a continuum, if you will, where on one side you do have let the parents decide what the kids do with their phones, what the parameters are, how they're going to manage their child's sort of digital literacy. Whereas on the other, we have towns who might decide, okay, look, kids, no phones, no smartphones. That's it. We want to hang on until your brain can actually process what you're doing and understand the consequences of what you're doing. We've touched on sort of one end of the continuum and giving the control to parents, but we are seeing examples of the other end of the continuum as well.
So when it comes to regulation, there is a lot of conversation around banning smartphones, and there's a lot of conversation around big tech having a massive role in the issues that kids are encountering. Whereas that's not something that I believe is important to do. We should be banning smartphones. I do understand why parents would agree with it on a community level, but that is going to do nobody favors in the long term. I think that we're doing a disservice to kids by taking away the technology from them. I do think that it needs to be regulated in a household level. So the parents need to understand how to control or how to manage the devices at home. Also, if you can imagine, if there's 1 or 2 towns in Ireland who say, okay, no phones for kids, and then we hand them the phones at 18 or 17 or whatever it is, they're going to go absolutely mad because it's the exact same concept of underage drinking, and not to compare it directly, but if you say to a 16, 17-year-old, no, you're not allowed to have a drink, what are they going to do? They're going to go underage drinking. And from an Irish culture, growing up in Ireland, we both know that is very common. So banning smartphones outright and banning social media, it's not the way to do it. It should be a progressive approach. And like I said, regulated at home. When it comes to big tech, I think big tech do have a role to play in it. However, big tech don't really care. I think that they're not in the business of protecting children. They're in the business of making money, and that's what they do. So there needs to be other ways that we can actually manage this on a smaller level. And that is what we believe is education, which is teaching kids how to use smartphones and social media safely, teaching parents how to navigate social media and smartphones safely too.
That is such a salient point about kids finding a way. If they see their mates are doing something, they will find a way to sneak out. They will have clandestine phones. They will share their mates' phones. I suppose it is such an inherent part of being a teenager and finding your own sort of personality is to go out and experiment in ways that perhaps are not the best for you. So you think that this is kind of technology could be the new drinking then, if this is how people sort of choose to define themselves?
I mean, I think if parents and governments, communities start banning smartphones, you're gonna look at smartphones and social media. Light drinking, it is going to be like, it's what you can't have, what kids can't have. They're gonna want it. There's such a negative opinion about technology, and that mindset needs to shift. Technology, smartphones, social media, these are tools. That's all that they are. We always say you wouldn't hand car keys to a kid without driving lessons. It should be the same with smartphones. You wouldn't hand car keys to a kid anyway. But would you get on the M50 if you didn't know how to drive? Absolutely no way, right? So the car brings you the freedom of the open road. It gets you from A to B. It gives you that independence, that freedom. It's an incredible feeling. And the only reason that you did it was because you have learned about the rules of the road. You learned how to drive a car, you know how to maybe change a tire, whatever it is. And smartphones, I think, are the exact same thing. They give you the freedom, the independence, the creativity. They also get you from A to B for using Google Maps. But these are tools. You need to learn how to use them properly. That's all that they are.
That was Ruth Guest, founder of Saoirse, and you can find their website at saoirse.ai. The link for that, as always, in the description area of this podcast right now.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's almost it for our show this week. Do check out some more stories that we have online that we couldn't talk about, including what, Niall?
Yeah, we have Jason Walsh's take on Apple's EU smackdown, as we've been talking about earlier. We have, would you want to know if an AI had a role in your next job interview? And a new study from Atlantic Technological University, Donegal, on monitoring the health of people living in remote areas.
Those stories and more online for you right now at techcentral.ie. We're back again, as always, next Friday with a brand new show online and with RT Radio 1 Extra as well. And do remember, please share our podcast with a friend. If they're into tech, tell them to look up Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify, or now on YouTube as well. Until next time, for myself, Dusty Rhodes, and of course, Niall Kitson, thanks for listening. Have a great weekend.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland, or listen with RTE Radio 1 Extra. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.